Good day, everyone. This is Ma'am She, your instructor in the readings in Philippine history. Before we start our new lesson, let's have a quick review of what we have discussed last time. Your previous activity was investigating your own past. You look at important events in your life and tried to investigate them like a historian. You identified what happened, when it happened, and what evidence could prove that it really happened. You may have used photographs, certificates, videos, messages, or even asked your family and friends. From that activity, we learned one important thing. We need evidence to understand the past. Now let me ask you, if you can investigate your own past using evidence, how do you think historians investigate the past of the Philippines? For example, how do we know what happened 100 years ago when none of us were there? Historians use historical sources. This can include documents, letters, photographs, newspapers, artifacts, government records, and oral accounts. But here's something important. Can we believe everything we read in a historical source? Not necessarily. We need to ask questions such as who created the source? When was it created? Why was it created? What does it tell us? Can we trust the information? In this lesson, we will first understand what history is and why we study it. Then we will learn how to identify, examine, and understand historical sources. I want you to think of yourselves not just as students reading history, but as investigators of the past. Last time you investigated your own past. This time, we are going to investigate our past as Filipinos. We defined history as the study, the record, and the explanation or interpretation of the past events. And it came from the Greek word historia, which means inquiry, to ask question, or find out. In its simple sense, history is the study of the past, particularly the people, events, experiences, changes, and developments that shape the present. But history is more than simply knowing what happened. Historians examine evidence from the past and try to understand what happened, why it happened, and how people experienced the consequences it produced. But history is not just memorizing dates. Dates and names are important because they help us establish chronology. But if we only memorize and we don't understand why these events happened, who was involved, and what people believed, and what consequences followed, then we have memorized information, but we have not necessarily understood history. History asks deeper questions. For example, why did the Philippine Revolution happen? Why did Filipinos fight for independence? Why did different groups have different ideas about the future of the Philippines? These questions require analysis and interpretation. Now let's move to the next major question. Why do we study history? I want you to think about your own life. If you erased everything that happened to you in the past, like you have an amnesia, would you still understand who you are today? Probably not. Our experiences shaped our identity, values, decisions, relationships, beliefs, and goals. The same is true for societies and nations. The Philippines today did not simply appear. The Philippines that we know today was shaped by centuries of experiences, decisions, conflicts, interactions, successes, failures, and changes. Therefore, studying history helps us understand how we arrived at where we are today. Number one reason for studying history is that it helps us understand the present. Many things happening today have roots in the past. For example, why there are a lot of dialects spoken in the Philippines? Why do we have certain social problems? Why do land, agriculture, education, and governance look the way they do today? To understand many of these questions, we need to look at history. So the present becomes clearer when we understand the past. The second reason is that it helps us understand change. History allows us to see how societies change over time. Think about your own life. You were once a child, then you became a teenager. Now you are a college student. You change, the same happens to societies. The Philippines 100 years ago was different from the Philippines today. Our technology, economy, and culture, political system, education, and way of life have changed. History allows us to ask what changed, why did it change, or who or what caused the change. The third reason is that history helps us understand different people and perspectives. History is also about people, and people don't always think alike. The historical event can be viewed differently by government officials, farmers, indigenous communities, political leaders, and ordinary citizens. This is why we should not immediately assume that one account tells the entire story. Studying history encourages us to ask, whose perspective am I reading? Whose voice is missing? What evidence supports this account? This helps us become more critical thinkers. Fourth reason for studying history is that history helps us make informed decisions. Finally, history can help us make better decisions. History does not give us a perfect formula for solving every problem, but it gives us experiences to examine. We can look at previous decisions and ask, what happened? Why did it happen? What were the consequences? What can we learn from it? In that sense, history gives us a deeper understanding that can help us think about present and future decisions. Now, because you are studying the field of agriculture, I want you to think about this question. Why should an agriculture student study Philippine history? For a moment, I want you to pause the video and think about it. Share your answer in the comment section. Your answer might have connection to the following. These things did not develop overnight. They have histories. For example, if you want to understand certain agricultural practice today, we can ask, where did these practices come from? Why did people adopt it? What historical events influenced them? This is how history becomes relevant to your own field. Let me give you a thought processing question. If history could talk, what do you think history would say to you? Would history will say, learn from me. Remember where you came from? Don't repeat the mistakes of the past. Understand me before judging the present or something else. Choose one. You may comment your answer. But let me clear something to you. History and memory are not the same. Let's go back to our personal timeline. You wrote about the events that you remember, but is the memory the same as history? Not necessarily. Memory is personal. History is a systematic study of the past using available evidence and interpretation. Your memory can be important evidence, but historians still need to examine it alongside other sources. For example, if you say, I remember that this happened, a historian might ask, what other evidence can support your memory? This is why historical study requires careful examination of sources. Before we end our discussion, I want you to think about everything we talked about today. You began this lesson by studying your own history. You identified events, you looked for evidence, you interviewed another person, you discovered different perspectives. And from that simple activity, we arrived at an important understanding of history. So I want you to complete this sentence. After today's discussion, I now understand that history is important because you may send your answer in the chat, in our group chat via Messenger. Before the end of this video, let me leave you with this thought. History is not simply about the past. History helps us understand who we are, where we came from, how our society changed, and why the world around us is the way it is today. And as students of agriculture and natural resources, you are not studying history simply because it is part of your curriculum. You are studying it because the communities you will serve have histories. The land has a history, agriculture has a history. And understanding those histories can help us better understand the challenges and opportunities we face today. Thank you, everyone, and I hope that after today's lesson, you will never look at history in exactly the same way again. See you in our next lesson.